The sound of a bustling ancient marketplace, the chatter of merchants, the clinking of coins, the heat of the midday sun in Athens, then, suddenly, gasps of shock ripple through the crowd. A man emerges, barefoot, unkempt, a cloak ragged and torn. He carries nothing but a wooden staff, a battered bowl, and a look in his eyes that both terrifies and fascinates. Without hesitation, he throws the bowl aside. "Even this," he mutters, "is unnecessary." The crowd stares, some laugh, some sneer, but the man, this strange, wiry figure, remains unmoved. He lowers himself to the ground and drinks water directly with his hands. A grin spreads across his face. This man is Diogenes of Sinope, the beggar who lived like a dog, the philosopher who spat on comfort, mocked power, and ridiculed pride, the thinker who claimed civilization itself was the greatest lie humanity ever told. This is not a tale of dusty scrolls and abstract theories. This is the story of a man who turned philosophy into performance art. A man who lived his beliefs so radically that people thought he was insane. A man who, in the heart of Athens, dared to ask, what if everything we value, status, wealth, luxury, reputation, was a cage? Diogenes was born in Sinope, a Greek colony on the Black Sea, around 412 BC. His father was a banker, a man of some standing, but Diogenes' path would be anything but respectable. The story goes that his father was accused of tampering with the city's currency, and Diogenes, whether guilty or not, was caught up in the scandal. He fled or was exiled to Athens, homeless, disgraced. But rather than rebuild his life, Diogenes embraced ruin. Rather than rise again, he descended into poverty, into shame, into a philosophy so raw it would disturb the foundations of Greek society. He became a cynic, from the Greek word kainikos, meaning dog-like. And dog-like he was. He slept in the streets, sometimes in a barrel or a large clay jar. He ate scraps. He relieved himself in public. He rejected every comfort people thought necessary. And yet, in this strange, ragged man, people saw something more than madness. They saw a truth they were afraid to face. Imagine Athens at its height, temples gleaming with marble, statues rising toward the gods, markets overflowing with goods, philosophers debating virtue and justice in shaded courtyards. And in the midst of all this glory, a man choosing to live like an animal. Why? Because Diogenes believed human beings had buried themselves under layers of lies. We chase wealth, we seek honor, we crave recognition, we polish our words, we put on masks. But the dog lives honestly. It eats when hungry, it sleeps when tired, it feels no shame in its nature. The dog does not pretend to be more than it is. So Diogenes said, let us return to nature, let us strip away the illusions, let us live in accordance with our most honest needs. This was not philosophy written in books. It was philosophy performed with his body, with his very life. Every act of defiance, every shameless gesture was a lesson. To Diogenes, the dog was the true philosopher, and so he lived as one. The Cynic creed was simple: virtue is the only true good. Everything else, wealth, power, luxury, is worthless. But Diogenes took it further than anyone else dared. He walked the streets of Athens during the day, holding a lantern. When people asked what he was doing, he replied, I am looking for an honest man. He never found one. He spat on rich men's carpets. When Plato defined humans as featherless bipeds, Diogenes plucked a chicken, held it up, and declared, Behold, a man. He mocked politicians, philosophers, kings, and beggars alike. To him all were enslaved, not by chains, but by desires. He once saw a child drinking with his cupped hands, and realizing he had no need for even his wooden bowl, he threw it away. Every action was a rejection of artificial needs. Every gesture an attack on hypocrisy. Perhaps the most famous scene in Diogenes' life was his meeting with Alexander the Great. Picture it. The conqueror of nations, a man draped in wealth and glory, approaches a ragged beggar sunbathing in the dirt. Alexander stands above him and says, "Ask of me any favor you wish." Diogenes squints up at the great king. "Yes," he says, "stand out of my sunlight." The crowd gasps, some laugh, some are horrified, but Alexander is struck. Later, he would tell his men, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." It was a moment that revealed the truth. Power and wealth mean nothing to a man who has renounced all need. Diogenes had something Alexander could never conquer: freedom. Here lies the genius of Diogenes. He wasn't just mocking society for the sake of it. He was exposing the psychology of human enslavement. Wealth enslaves us. Reputation enslaves us. Even shame enslaves us. Diogenes tested himself against every chain. He begged in the streets, stripping away pride. He ate simple food, stripping away luxury. He performed shameless acts in public, stripping away society's grip on the body. To him, the path to happiness was simple. Need less, want less, live more. In modern psychology, we might call this radical exposure therapy. He was stripping the human psyche down to its bare essentials, confronting fears until they lost their hold. The fear of poverty, he embraced it. The fear of humiliation, he lived it daily. The fear of death, he mocked it. And in doing so, he discovered a paradoxical form of invincibility. A man who wants nothing cannot be bribed. A man who fears nothing cannot be controlled. A man who depends on nothing cannot be broken. This was Diogenes's freedom, and this was his gift to philosophy. Of course, his way of life earned him enemies. He was insulted, beaten, mocked. Children threw stones at him. Respectable men dismissed him as insane. But every insult was proof that he was on the right path. If society rejected him, it was because he rejected society's sickness. When asked what wine he liked best, he said, "Another man's." When asked where he came from, he replied, "I am a citizen of the world." This idea, cosmopolitanism, was revolutionary. At a time when people identified with their city-state above all else, Diogenes declared himself free of borders. He belonged not to Athens or Sinope, but to all of humanity. Diogenes never wrote books. He left no treatises. His philosophy lived in stories, in gestures, in sharp one-liners. And yet his influence is enormous. The Cynics inspired the Stoics, who would shape Roman philosophy. His idea of radical freedom echoes in modern minimalism, in anarchism, in existentialism. Even today, when we talk about rejecting consumerism, about questioning authority, about living authentically, we are, in some way, echoing Diogenes. But his lesson is not easy. It is not a philosophy of comfort. It is a philosophy of confrontation. Diogenes holds up a mirror, and in that mirror we see our chains. Imagine Diogenes alive today. Not in Athens, but in New York, or London, or Lagos. Would he have a phone, a house, a job? No. He would live on the streets, mocking the rush of businessmen, laughing at politicians, exposing our endless hunger for likes, followers, status. He would throw away the smartphone as he once threw away the bowl. He would wander the malls and laugh at our endless shopping. He would walk into corporate offices and ask, "Is there a single, honest man here?" And once again, we would be forced to ask ourselves, what are we chasing? What do we truly need? And what illusions have we mistaken for life? The end of his life is shrouded in stories. Some say he died of eating raw octopus, others that he held his breath until he perished, still others that he was bitten by a dog. But perhaps his death matters less than his life. He left the world with no possessions, no wealth, no monuments. And yet, more than 2,000 years later, his name is still remembered. Diogenes, the man who chose sunlight over power. The man who chose truth over respect. The man who chose freedom over illusion. The image fades back to Athens, the marketplace, the barrel, the ragged man under the sun. People laugh, people mock, but he is unbothered. Because in his own strange way, he has won. For while others are slaves to gold, to hunger, to fear, Diogenes is free. And that freedom is brighter than any crown, stronger than any empire, richer than any treasure. Perhaps that is why Alexander admired him. Perhaps that is why philosophers feared him. And perhaps that is why we still tell his story today. Because in a world drowning in illusions, the madman who lived like a dog may have been the freest man who ever lived.